Welcome to the Intuitive Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Rafferty, medical doctor, PhD, Reiki and shamanic intuitive healer. I'm here to bring you on a journey of holistic healing that explores the science of the physical body combined with mental and emotional well-being, energetic and spiritual health. And I am beyond excited today to have Dr. Gemma Newman here with us. And Gemma is an absolutely incredible soul. I'm so excited to have this conversation. But Gemma is a GP with over 20 years experience working in Surrey over in the UK. And Gemma is an ambassador for the plant-based health professionals and is a member of the British Society for Lifestyle Medicine. And personally, while I went on a journey with my gut microbiome health, I learned so much about nutrition from Gemma's amazing book, The Plant Powered Doctor. And in 2023, Gemma also released a book, Get Well, Stay Well. But today, we're here to explore a whole other side of Gemma, which I have had the absolute privilege of experiencing, which is the amazing energetic aspect of your being as a Jikiden Reiki. I suppose, would you call it a master? I don't even know if within that lineage there are masters. Is there? Like, I'm just so excited to talk about all things Reiki and energy. And first of all, welcome, Gemma.
Thank you, Tony. I love your enthusiasm and I love you, and I'm so happy to be here with you.
Oh, Gemma, it is so amazing. So just to give the listeners a bit of a background, so people will be aware from the podcast, I'm obsessed with energy. It's how I work. Everything is intuitive with regard to how I kind of go on a journey with people. And my journey started off with an awakening that came from a Reiki attunement. And I went on and trained to be a Reiki master through all the different levels of very specific lineages of Reiki. And then I started all my shamanic training. And, you know, a couple of months ago, I had this beautiful email from you saying that you were doing Jikiden Reiki Reijus, which is a little bit different to what I'd done previously. And I jumped at the opportunity to come over with some of my very close soul friends to do some work with you. And it was such a powerful and amazing couple of days. And, you know, I feel like I'm so excited. I want to talk to you about all of it. But can you introduce kind of how you got into Reiki, what Reiki even is, and the specific lineage of Reiki that you work with? Because I learned so much from you. It was very different from what I'd actually originally trained in. And the stories you told and everything that you discussed was just so powerful. So I was so keen for the listeners to be able to learn from you.
So Jikiden is basically Japanese for directly passed down. And it's a way to differentiate all the different forms of Reiki from the Reiki that is most similar to how it was taught when it was created. Now, that's not to say that energy was created by Usui Sensei back in the 1920s and 30s. This is universal life force energy, which has always existed. But it's quite unique that an individual in human history was able to figure out a way to help people who hadn't been on an enlightenment journey to tap into that energy and give it to others for the purposes of healing.
Oh my God, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I, even just your mention there of this universal life force energy, to be able to tap into that and to call it through the body, to be able to deliver it to people, to assist with their healing journeys is just so incredibly powerful. And so tell me a little bit about how you ended up finding your way into it. I always love talking to doctors that find their way into energy and how much it can complement our understanding of just how many different facets of who we are need to be included in healing, really.
Yeah, I agree. So for me, it was, I guess, a combination of different things. I always really connected with the idea of helping people to feel better. Obviously, that's why I went into medicine, to help people. I also, looking back on it as a young child, I had this very strong sense that there was more to life than what we currently can see. I had what you would call I guess, sort of out of body experiences as a young child, which then allowed me an awareness that I was more than my physical body. And I also very deeply connected to faith. So I decided to go along to church on my own when I was about 11. And I used to go every week because I really enjoyed the ritual of it. I enjoyed the way that the prayers were conducted. It gave me some time to myself to think and to pray and to be. And I continued my fascination with religion. I studied Islam and Judaism when I was doing my A-levels before I went to medical school. I've always been interested in psychology as well. So I learned different psychology techniques to help people feel better. And I also have just been sort of fascinated with the idea of cultures as well. So I lived in India for a spell when I was a younger child. And so I understood the concepts of things like chakras. And then I learned a bit about Chinese medicine and the meridian system. And I realized that there were some similarities between these ideas of things like prana and chi and ki. So it just got me really interested. And I did gravitate to Jikiden Reiki because it is the form of teaching that is closest to what Usui Sensei was teaching back in the 1920s and 1930s. It has changed the least. And there's lots of interesting history around that, but essentially it's as it was taught to Hayashi Sensei and the way that he taught it back in the 1930s. And it's simply sort of it's a very simple healing system. So once you understand it, anybody can do it. Anybody can just put their hands on people and start to give this beautiful energy. And there's no real rules around being able to do it. It's just so simple and beautiful. And that's what I loved about it.
Yeah. Oh, it's so lovely to hear you talk about all the different facets of kind of the journey you've gone on with your medical training on the physical body, with the mind, and the psychology techniques that you use, and with energy and with spirituality. And what I find in the clients I work with, it's all those different facets that make us up. And it's just so lovely to hear you kind of exploring. And, it's so funny because I find with a lot of this stuff, it's the interest that we have as people who want to help people, or as the empathic side of us, that kind of draws us into all these different spaces without even realizing. And then when we kind of reach a destination, we're like, oh my God, look at all these skills that I've acquired unknowingly, like in this kind of pursuit to help people in a really holistic way.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? All the different things that you learn along the way. And I think when your intention is one of giving, and your intention is one to help other people feel good in themselves, then whatever path you choose is going to be the right one. Especially, for you and your journey, it's been really fascinating for me to learn. But for me, when I learned about this form of Reiki, and then I started to practice it 6 years ago, and then I deepened my practice, and then I began to teach, it just sort of went from strength to strength. And it just feels, it's one of those things that initially I was actually quite reluctant to share online because I was worried about external judgment, especially because I've been an author and I have to speak quite authoritatively on a number of sort of topics around nutrition and wellness and talk about studies and evidence-based medicine. And then for me to pivot towards energy healing, I was worried about my credibility. So it took me a while to decide that wasn't as important to me as just being able to give this beautiful gift, because it works and it's beautiful and it's part of what I do and who I am. So yes, it felt very freeing when I decided to start talking about it.
Oh, I'll never forget, actually, it really, really resonated with me because I've been following you on Instagram for years, obviously from my own interests in the benefits of plant-based diets and the gut microbiome. And, I like, you speak so clearly and communicate quite dense information in a really beautiful, kind of very clear way. And I had always loved following you because you radiate a beautiful energy yourself. And then I will never forget there was one clip that showed up from your Instagram feed about Jikiden Reiki. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, I love her even more now. So actually, when you showed your most authentic light, I was like, this is fabulous, because you were speaking to me on such a deeper level, you know? I was like, there's other doctors out there that have an interest in this. And I listened to the podcast recording that you'd done some time ago.
Yeah.
With regard to it. And so it was always on my radar. And like, I just love that you're kind of communicating this. And I can understand, like, I don't have that much of a following, I suppose, on Instagram. And it's always a place I just like to share kind of things that interest me and bits and pieces, rather than kind of a cultivated space. But even in that, there is an apprehension in the back of my mind about sharing certain things, because you do have your medical background and it's all very logical and science-based. But actually, I work so much within the space of energy now that's intuitively driven, that it's almost like, well, where do I fit? Where do you fit? Like, it's almost like falling between the stools in some senses, you know?
It is. And I think that's our purpose, Tony. I think that's our purpose, is to try to bridge the two worlds and help people to be able to come to this kind of wisdom from both sides. Because I really resonated with the story of Dr. Hayashi Sensei, the one who was the doctor in the Navy in Japan, and was able to actually set up a treatment center in Kyoto. And he was very much bridging those two worlds too, working as a doctor in Japan and then learning how to do Reiki and then deciding to pivot his practice to that. It really resonated with me, because I thought, this is somebody who was actually the father of spreading Reiki across the world, because he was the one that obviously taught Hawaii Takata in Hawaii, which is how the Western world even knew about the word Reiki at all. So he was very much in that energy of being able to and wanting to spread the word globally. Obviously, that didn't happen in the way that he probably would have wanted at the time, because of the outbreak of World War II and a lot of the issues around sharing energetic healing practices in Japan from that point forward. But that was his original intention. And I think that that's really what people like you and I do in the world as well. We try to make this kind of wisdom a bit more digestible and a bit more understandable to the people who would otherwise not know about it, or would have even perhaps discarded it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's one thing I definitely have come to realize. It's like, I think when you start working with energy medicine, and you remember the wisdom associated with it through kind of your meditation and your healing sessions, there is a responsibility there to be able to share that wisdom and knowledge. And I think I feel incredibly privileged, actually, to be trained in medicine and to be able to do this work as well. Like you say, this beautiful bridge that actually people can trust you because of the education background that you have and the wisdom and the knowledge you hold with these things too. But there are also, I do think, things that are happening in the universe that we haven't quite been able to explain yet. And the magic of energy is just so, so powerful.
Well, I think the reason we can't explain it is because I don't think we've figured it out. It's like, what's it like? It's like ants trying to understand Bitcoin. We think we're so clever.
Oh my God, I love it. Yes. Yeah. This thing, ChatGPT can't give us the answer.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the missing equation that physics is lacking is love. That's the missing equation, because Chiyoko Sensei, who founded the Jikiden Reiki lineage, said that that's what Reiki was, that Reiki was love. And I think that she was right. She was a Japanese lady who cared for her family and her friends and her local people through Reiki, but she had that kind of wisdom already instilled in her because she was doing it all the time. And love isn't just an emotion, it's the universal force behind the geometry of creation. It's what allows attraction between atoms and the formation of covalent bonds, and it's the same love that also allows empathy between human minds. And I think people we haven't figured out a way to include love in the equation of creation, but I think that's definitely what's missing.
Oh, absolutely. And I suppose when I came to do my training with you, we spoke about this with regard to like the electromagnetic field of the heart and the capacity of the myocytes in the heart to generate their own electricity.
Yeah.
And like, even from a scientific perspective, it's so powerful when you think about the capacity of what the heart can actually do on an electrical and energetic
Well,
level.
it's mind blowing, and people just take it for granted that our hearts beat. But those myocytes are making their own electricity. Our bodies make light. We are literally light beings. We make light through our metabolic processes. I just think there's so much that we don't see with our eyes that we can feel with our hearts. And you just have to look at the coherence of the universe, all the fractals of nature and the sacred geometry and the efficiency of natural systems. It seems so obvious to me that the universe didn't emerge from chaos, but intention.
Yeah.
And you can call it whatever you like. I think obviously people have different feelings when it comes to words like God or source or energy or love. But it's something that is, I think, far beyond our comprehension in terms of its awesome scale and the love that is required to create such a coherent universe.
Oh, yeah, that's really so powerful. And I love even talking about it. On my journey through my Buddhist practice, one of the most transformative meditative practices that I learned was the metta bhavana, which is the loving kindness meditation. And it was all about cultivating through meditation this love in your heart, and imagine it radiating out onto the people that you love the most. And you kind of go through these different stages in the meditation where you get down to the point where you're projecting this love onto people you don't know or people that are causing you distress. And it's almost like training your energy and this kind of cultivation of this pure love in your heart and projecting it onto people that you don't know and are causing you distress. Like, it was such an incredibly powerful practice. And, when I started learning how to do Reiki, when you actually go on a journey with that and you think, oh my God, so many of these spiritual teachings are very, very similar and aligned with kind of the core belief structures. Although they might differ on the surface, actually, the energy and the central focus being on love and heart-centered approach to life is so powerful, isn't it?
It is. And I think that's actually what we as a society are often missing when it comes to psychotherapy and even mindfulness practices. It's missing the kindness element. And I think sometimes you can get into something like mindfulness or even meditation, and if you're missing the sense that we are all connected and united in terms of our creation by a loving being, it's actually even possible to, I think, in some cases, increase certain narcissistic or selfish tendencies, because, again, you're really focusing a lot more on self when you begin a lot of these practices. So I think really focusing on our connectedness is a way to avoid that outcome and to actually get the most out of any kind of wellness practice that you have. And that you stated it so beautifully.
Oh, that's gorgeous, Gemma. That's really gorgeous. And that's the thing, isn't it, about that recognition. And even to just extend it beyond kind of interpersonal energetic connections, but our connection to the land, to plants. Like, I'm convinced that my cat speaks English. Like, he's a magical little cat. But, basic things. And your little Rosie as well. She's like a little gift to the world, isn't she?
She is.
But on an energetic level, it is just so powerful when we realize that actually we are just on the day-to-day, just exchanging energy with everything in our surrounding.
Yeah.
And like to even just go out and put your feet on the ground. And I know we laugh, we're like, go and hug a tree. But oh my God, the joy that it brings me and my clients when I'm like, go and just connect with pure energy,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the most powerful things. And these things are free. This is the other thing that I think is just so wonderful. You don't have to pay a big amount of money for these expensive biohacks or apps or programs. You can literally connect with nature, touch the ground with your feet, breathe in a forest, get those phytoncides in your lungs, help your immune system, create those natural killer cells so that you can have a really well-functioning immune system, feed yourself with nourishing living foods, aim to think loving thoughts, which is always hard to do, especially when you're going through suffering. It's interesting thinking about how we can come to this kind of heart coherence, because the world is so full of suffering. I think that's one of the things that I think people really struggle with. And I often think about, you mentioned your Buddhist meditation. I often think about Huan Yin or Senju Canon in Japanese, that bodhisattva that was essentially born from Amida Buddha's tears of compassion for the suffering of the world. So we can create something loving and beautiful from that recognition that there is a lot of suffering. And the reason that she is depicted as a bodhisattva is because she didn't want to go to the Pure Land until every single being had also been able to attain enlightenment and love and was no longer suffering. So I think that's something that we can really reflect on in our own lives and in our own hearts. Let's bring other people with us if we can.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely love that, especially with the challenges that are going on globally at the moment. It's so beautiful to hear you say that. And this is what I've been saying to some of my clients as well, because the energy is dense collectively at the moment. And, I myself, as an energy healer, the fatigue has been unreal the last few weeks as all of these things are ramping up globally. And, this is literally the essence of kind of what I've been having with regard to the discussions around these things. Is there's a collective energy at the moment, and, just tuning into your heart and recognizing that we're all connected, and the love that you can generate and spread has a measurable positive impact.
It really does. And I think that's such a hard thing to do, is to bring yourself back into coherence and that sort of that loving vibration, as it were, when there's lots, as you say, I like the way that you've phrased it as dense, because it does feel like that. But the beauty of obviously aiming to live in more expansive emotions is that they are also something that you can actually share and sort of almost, I wouldn't say it's catching as necessarily, but you can definitely feel the energy shifting. When you come at a situation with a loving attitude, it definitely helps other people around you, and they can feel that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's just reminded me of the training when we were doing it. You could actually, when we were working with our hands on each other, you can actually feel the energetic shifts. And people talk about these kind of densities or stagnancies they had in their body that just become filled with light.
Yeah.
So I'd love just to give people a bit of a background, because we're kind of talking a little bit about all these beautiful key people on the journey with kind of where Jikiden came from, and kind of this kind of life force energy that we channel and the connection with the heart. And so we're kind of putting all the pieces together on our discussion. But I'd love for you to tell us, because I was fascinated about this when you were talking to us during our training, with regard to how did Mikao Usui actually begin to channel the Reiki energy? And this story, I just loved it when you told us, and you're so passionate about it. I was like, this is brilliant.
Well,
how did Reiki come to be, essentially?
How did it happen? Well, I mean, it was an accidental discovery on his road to trying to achieve enlightenment. So he was a man. He's born. it was 1865 in Japan. He had a very varied career, and he worked in many different disciplines. He was even private secretary to a very famous politician in Japan back in the day. And he went through what you'd call a personal crisis. He launched a business, he went bankrupt, and I guess you'd say perhaps it was his own dark night of the soul. He was starting to think about his purpose, why he was on this earth. And he had been exposed to lots of different cultures through his work, but he grew up in a Shinto tradition, which is essentially the Japanese way of thinking about our connection to nature. And all of the spoken word and the kanji characters, traditional kanji characters, are written and formed by allegory, which is kind of related to the natural world. So the Japanese very much recognize their connection with that. But he also was in a culture where they revered Senju Kanon, who we just spoke about, the goddess of compassion. And whether you were Buddhist or Christian or didn't have a faith, everybody in Japan was Shinto and everybody loved Senju Kanon. So there are these ideas, that he grew up with. And he decided after his struggles in business that he would go and spend time in a Zen monastery, Zen Buddhism, which he didn't grow up with Zen Buddhist monasteries, but he was growing up in a tradition of that kind of environment. There was a different form of Buddhism that he grew up with. I think it was Pure Land Buddhism. Anyway, in a Zen monastery, any faith can go there and meditate and just be. So he decided that that's what he would do. So he went to the monastery and he lived there for, I think, 3 years, meditating and praying daily. And his own master, he went to his master and said, "Oh, I'm not enlightened yet. What am I supposed to do now?" And although it sounds strange, it makes sense in the tradition. The Zen monk suggested that he go to Mount Kurama nearby and go to one of the shrines there and meditate and fast until death, because it was their belief that he may not achieve enlightenment in this lifetime, but that if he was to meditate and fast to death, that he would be reincarnated and it would be possible for him to achieve enlightenment in his next lifetime. So that's what he went up Mount Kurama to do, to die and to meditate and to fast. And then dying would be the natural outcome, but it was the meditating and the fasting that was the intention. So off he went up the mountain. And after about 21 days of this, he had this sudden lightning bolt strike in his brain, and an incredible feeling of love and peace and compassion and ecstasy came over him. And he realized that he had actually achieved this enlightened state once he regained consciousness, Anjin Ryome, which is what he'd been aiming for. And he was so excited. He returned to the physical world and ran excitedly down the mountain. And on Mount Kurama, there's an awful lot of huge ancient trees and big tree trunks and tree roots coming out from the ground. And it's quite possible that he tripped over one of those tree roots, or it may have been a rock, I'm not sure. But he ended up going back to reality with a giant thud because he tripped over something and ripped off his toenail. And he went to grab his toenail and he realized that having grabbed it, the bleeding stopped very quickly and the pain subsided very quickly. And that something unusual had happened. He'd actually achieved a healing state. And so he was very confused by this and carried on his journey to his Zen master. And on the way down, he came across a family with a young girl who had a horrendous toothache. So he touched his hand to her jaw and her toothache disappeared. And he began to realize that he'd actually stumbled upon something really special. So he went back to his Zen master and explained, and he was simply told, you can't keep this gift for yourself. You have to now try to figure out a way to share this with others. And it's really quite remarkable that just 2 months later, he began to not only share this with everybody, but figure out a way that he could actually help other people to access that same energy. And he must have been spending many years prior to that studying and being aware of different religious philosophies and ways of being, for him to so quickly have come up with this way of being able to share this beautiful energy with others. And I just absolutely love that story. So he kept on teaching in seminars across Japan, and one of his students was Dr. Hayashi Sensei, Chijiro Hayashi Sensei, who happened to be a very high up senior official in the Japanese Navy. And yeah, and that's where the story continues. If you wanted me to share that bit as well, but that's the initial beginning of Reiki. That's how it began.
It's so fascinating. Like, I just love it. I just absolutely love it. And this is the thing, like, with some of the work that we do as energy healers or channeling this energy, it's profound how the energy works for some people, resolving pain, helping to like quicken healing in certain conditions. It just blows my mind what I see in the practice every day.
Yeah.
But what I'd love to kind of explore is, so you talked about Mikao Usui being able to transmit this energy to other people. So, you know, when I spoke initially at the very beginning of the podcast, I was talking about going for Reiki attunements, and in the more Western style, I suppose, Reiki traditions that I trained in, the energy was passed on from one person to the next, from a master onto the student with an attunement. And it's believed that like the chakras are open, the energy symbols are put into different parts of the body, and that you can then channel the energy. But what was fascinating to me was actually through the Jikiden tradition, it's the energy is kind of passed on through a specific process called a Reiju, isn't it?
Yes.
And I'd love for you to kind of speak into like, how is it passed down? And, you know, obviously I've done some work in the Western tradition. Now I've trained with Jikiden Reiki with yourself. How do they even differ in how it's passed down and things like that? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
So the reason that Western Reiki exists is because of a wonderful woman in Japan who was a Japanese American, and she practiced, and she actually learnt from Dr. Chijiro Hayashi Sensei when he came over from Japan to Hawaii to teach about 350 people over in Hawaii just before the Second World War in the 1930s. And what happened after the Second World War is the attacks, obviously, the atomic bomb and Pearl Harbor attacks were being planned. It was a time of great transition and great fear, and also a time where, especially after the Second World War, it was a huge psychological, well, not even just psychological, infrastructure hit for Japan. How the Second World War ended, they called it the Pacific War, and they were so convinced that they were going to win because the Meiji Emperor at the time was considered to be almost godlike in terms of his ability to make decisions and his connection with the divine. And so the Japanese people, I think there was such a huge cultural shift after the Second World War when he had to admit that he was wrong and that they were defeated. It was, you know, anathema. And basically, when the US forces came in after the Second World War and essentially took over, a lot of these sort of Japanese traditional healing methods were no longer able to be shared. And in Hawaii, the Japanese community there, you can imagine it would have been impossible to share original style Reiki in Hawaii after the Second World War. So it was shut down and she couldn't teach for many years. And even when she did start teaching again, maybe I think in the late 1970s, just before she died, she had to change it. Because people didn't want to learn about Japanese kanji characters and Japanese healing. So I think it's possible that these other aspects came into it. And there was also, you know, less, how do I say this? I think when I learned Jikiden Reiki, there was a lot of things I had to do, a lot of boxes I had to tick. The way that the Japanese work, there's a certain hierarchy, there's a certain amount of things you have to have done, amount of hours you have to have completed, and it's very much a system where you are recommended for progression, and you have to repeat the courses with different teachers. You have to really immerse yourself in the discipline. Whereas after the Second World War and after the changes that took place. For example, she renamed it Swedish massage rather than Reiki, so that people would go and experience the healing, because they wouldn't go to something that was considered Japanese. She had to get rid of all the kanji characters, and then other sort of influences came in. The ideas of chakras, is not specifically a Japanese idea, but an angel healing and all these other aspects started to be brought in by people who really connected with this energy and wanted to be able to bring their own experience to it. And that's what happens with humans and human nature. We all bring our own experience to an energy that we feel, and then we add to it and we add our own things. And that's essentially how these different branches were created, by these different schools of thought. And so the original Reiju, the Japanese word Reiju, it means, Rei means soul and Ju means to be given or granted permission. And that's essentially what you would call an attunement in the Western style. It's the idea that you have been given permission with humility to accept a certain soul energy to be able to be transmitted through you. And you are not taking anything from yourself. So when you're giving a treatment, you're not sapping your own energy, because it was never yours to begin with. You become like a channel for source energy or love energy or whatever you might want to call it. And you are able to receive and let that flow through you. And what's quite special about the Jikiden technique, or the original technique of Reiki, is that you can then begin to increase your perception of that energy. Like you would perceive hot or cold, for example. You're not having to, think hard or introduce other ideas or concepts. You can literally just increase your awareness of the perception in your hands to allow you to know where your hands need to go. And that's something that I don't think is in the Western approach. It's a word called byosen, which essentially is a way for you to pick up on where the energetic blockages are in the body. And it's not something that you have to intuit necessarily. It's actually something that you can simply perceive through your hands once you've become aware of it, is how I would say.
Oh, it's amazing. It's just so amazing when you think about it, our capabilities as humans, for everybody to connect with this like universal soul energy, and to be able to develop this skill of using energetic perception in their hand. It just blows my mind.
It is. It's an incredible gift. And for one individual to have figured out a way to allow all of us to have that potential, and we all can, anybody can. It's something that we can all, because we all have a soul and we all have energy within our body. So anybody can do it once they've been trained. But yeah, it's a really, really special, unique gift.
Oh, it's so beautiful. It really, really is so beautiful. And I'd love to just kind of tell the listeners a little bit about kind of what the training kind of looks like, because through the more Western styles of Reiki that I've gone on a journey with, there's all these different levels that you have to go through on your journey to be a Reiki master and to be able to give attunements to other people. But I learned so much when you were talking about the Jikiden Reiki tradition with regard to who can provide Reijus and actually what it looks like in the kind of training pathway, because it's quite significant. And you're just back from an amazing trip by the looks of it on Instagram, where you went through, was it over 60 different Reijus by the sounds of it you were giving and receiving?
By the end of the 8 days, there was 75.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I was feeling so poor.
Yeah, I'd say so. Well, I think so there was myself and three other beautiful souls during your training, in which you provided us with Reijus. And oh my God, I was rattled for weeks afterwards. You know, when so much of this pure light energy comes into the body, the stuff that no longer serves you, the shadowy elements, they ripple to the top. And oh my God, it was a journey.
Wow. Tell me, what did you notice? What did you notice?
Do you know, it was almost like I went through this kind of deep kind of death and rebirth period actually in the weeks afterwards. There was a lot of deep emotion. And I felt there was an energy of frustration that moved through my body purely at the fact that I began recognizing the things in my life that weren't in alignment. And, you know, when you call in, we do so much kind of manifesting, I suppose, these days, or envisioning where we want our lives to go and what's for our greatest good and the greatest good of my clients, my beautiful friends and family and all these things. But, you know, in order to step into that new way of being, you have to step out of the old way of being. And that became so apparent to me during our healings. It was magical. I floated out of your house after the weekend, and I felt brilliant for 2 or 3 days until everything started coming up where it was like, actually, you hold a new vibrational energy now. Like some of the things that you're holding desperately onto aren't in alignment with that. And, you know, it was the internal struggle of literally like white knuckles holding on desperately to the old belief structures, the whole old behaviors. There's so many different facets that kind of bubble to the surface where I was like, oh my God, Tony, it's time to surrender to the next phase. And it just went to show like the power of the Reijus that we received at the time. Yes. But it was the power of the people that were in the room, all the different souls that gathered for that beautiful 2 days that we spent together. Having multiple people channel this energy with their own beautiful individual essence. I just found it was so powerful. And I think yourself and the lovely souls that were there, they were all incredibly powerful souls. So, yeah.
It can be quite a journey. And it does change you because your heart becomes more open and you begin to see the areas of your life that you would like to change. So sometimes that can feel quite scary as well. But it's beautiful. And I think, everybody will have their own experiences with Reiju. It's interesting because I don't tend to ask people what they experienced during Reiju because I want them to just have their own experience. But people often tell me, and the things that they say, it's always really interesting. But of course, some people will experience absolutely nothing during a Reiju. And that's okay too, because ultimately I know that with the Reiju ceremony, they will have opened up that channel to the beauty of that life force or love energy, and it will manifest itself in their life in whatever way it's supposed to. And there's no negative element to this form of healing. There's a special thing that we say in Japanese, what I say, and then I also ask everybody in the room to say what we call the gokai, which allows only good energy to be in that process. There's nothing of a sort of lower vibration, as it were, that is then allowed. And it's a really beautiful thing. It's done by traditional Shinto tradition. So it's quite different, I would say, from a Western style attunement.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It was an amazing experience to be with you, because it was quite a different type of experience than the different types of attunements I'd had previously. But I've pulled you away from my question with all this kind of discussion about what happens afterwards. But it was more so with regard to the journey.
Oh, yes.
With regard to how it's handed down. And because you had mentioned, which I found intriguing, there's only, is it 2 Jikiden Reiki masters in the whole world, is there?
Well, in the Jikiden Reiki tradition, the word master isn't actually used at all.
Wow. Yeah.
I think it's from a place of humility. They understand that we are all students, and that people who are attuned, so-called, or reijued, can become teachers, but nobody is the master. And so even Mikao Usui himself, in the Japanese tradition, he didn't make himself top dog. He was one below the head of the institute, and he very specifically made that clear originally in the Japanese Gakkai, to say, I am not at the top. There is someone above me at the top. And that someone obviously is divinity, but I am a student. So Mikao Usui Sensei himself said that he was the student, and sensei means the teacher. But in this tradition, you can become what we call a Shihan, which is another way of expressing teacher. So no one is called master. You can become so as a Shihan Kaku, or an assistant teacher, you can teach people Shodan, which is the hands-on Reiki, where you literally just put your hands on people and give them healing. And then when you become a full Shihan, or a full teacher, you can teach people Okuden, which is the distance Reiki and the emotional healing technique Reiki. And once you've become a Shihan, you could potentially become a Dai Shihan, which is quite difficult to achieve. There's only a handful of those around the world. And then you can be the president of the institute. There was a European vice president or representative, and only those two people can create Shihans, which is my level now. And in fact, I've just come back from the teaching by one of those people who happens to live in Greece, and he's just retired. And so at the moment, currently, there is only one person in the world that can authorize for you to become a Shihan, and he lives in Japan, and he's called Tadao Sensei, and he's the head of the institute. He will probably soon figure out who he's going to make his vice representative, who could authorize for people to become Shihans, but we don't know who that's going to be or where they're going to be. So it's actually quite difficult to be able to achieve Shihan status. But I really want to emphasize that it's not difficult to learn. Like, once you have learnt it, you can do it, and you can give it to all your family and friends and everybody. And, if you want to become a practitioner, I think that process is actually incredibly easy, in my opinion. I don't know how you feel about it, Tony.
Oh my God, I love it. There's so many parts of that story. I'm like, I love all these things. Yeah, I absolutely love it. And that's the thing. So through the Western styles, with the first level that you go through, you can practice on yourself and some loved ones, but you can't actually become a practitioner until you've done your level 2. And, when I first started training, I just wanted to learn. I wanted to know everything about it and experience it. But it was almost like you're kind of being like held back in some senses from actually getting in and getting the nitty gritty. Because with this sort of work, you learn through experience by actually putting your hands on and actually feeling.
Yes, exactly, Tony. And so the big difference with Jikiden is it's very hard to become a Shihan, because they want to keep the original tradition pure. They want people to know exactly how it was originally done. And the only way to keep it completely as it was in the original way is to make it very difficult to become a Shihan. But once you go for the course, you can just touch and experience, and away you go. Like, that's the beauty of it. It's beautiful in its simplicity, and that's why I just love it so much, because I know that once I've given people the Reijus, they can go and they can help as many people as they like, and they if they practice it every day and live by the Gokkai, then they're going to experience incredible benefits for themselves and everybody around them. So that's what I love about it.
Oh, I love it, Gemma. I love it. I love it. I love it. And, just, I suppose, as we're finishing up, I just wanted to identify or point people in the direction of how they might be able to go about doing these Reijus? Because like I see that you've been running some workshops, which if anybody's listening, it is such a beautiful experience. I can't recommend it enough. It's such a lovely, lovely, lovely journey to go on with you, Gemma. Oh my God, it was beautiful. And yeah, will you be running more? How can people do the Reijus to be able to start channeling this beautiful energy?
So they can, they can join my seminars. I'm going to be my aim is to do them every 6 weeks. I think I'm going to run a seminar from my home. I live near London. So they can do that, but they don't have to train with me. If you go onto the Jikiden Reiki UK Association website, there will be other practitioners around the country. There are not that many of them because, as I said, to become a Shihan is a process. But you know that if you do go to a Shihan in this tradition, you will receive Reiju as it was originally done. So there's I had some incredible teachers and I've repeated the training. This is another aspect of becoming a Shihan. They're really keen on you repeating the training because you may learn something new from someone else who is also a Shihan in the same tradition, and it allows you to deepen your practice. So I had an incredible teacher called Amanda Jane, and she taught me to become a Shihan Kaku. And she was there right at the beginning, learning from Shiyoko Sensei. And of course, Franco Java Petta, who's sadly now retired from the Jikiden Reiki Institute. He is still practicing Reiki. And traveling around the world. And of course, there are other Shihans in the UK who can teach you how to do Reiki in this tradition. So I know of a couple in London. I know of a man based in Birmingham. I know there's at least 2 or 3 in Scotland. There are people that you can go to. And of course, you can reach out to me and I will put more seminars in the diary because I love teaching Jikiden Reiki. I know that, if you've come on a seminar, you can go home, you can start to touch everyone and anyone and begin to really understand and perceive that energy. And it's a beautiful thing. So yes, that's how you can do it.
Yes, I love it. And I recommend that everybody go to Gemma because it was such a powerful experience.
Oh.
And there's a beautiful little dog there to give you cuddles. And oh my God, we had some very powerful plant-based dishes at that time. So I have to tell you, it was overall just the most magical couple of days. Oh, Gemma, it has been such a pleasure. It's been such a pleasure to have you on. I'm so grateful for your time, kind of talking through all of these beautiful things with regard to Jikiden Reiki. And I hope all the listeners get a really good understanding of what Reiki is, how it came to be, how it's passed down, and how they can go on and start using Jikiden Reiki themselves. So yes, what's the best way to get in touch with you, Gemma?
Oh, well, Dr. Gemma Newman on Substack, Plant Power Doctor on Instagram, through my website, gemmanewman.com, and any other social platform.
Fabulous. That sounds great. Everybody definitely head over to the UK and do some Jikiden Reiki. We all need to be spreading this beautiful energy around the world, I think.